Larry Schweikart is the author of 7 Events That Made America America and 48 Liberal Lies About American History. Larry, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm looking forward to a fun conversation with you. All right, so hit me. Give me one of the 48 terrible lies that the libs tell America.
Well, we could start with, let me tell you the methodology of that book, which was that I looked at the top 20 U.S. history textbooks and kind of collated what they all said. So one of the very common ones I found, and almost all of them, was that the Rosenbergs were innocent. This was in almost all 20, and it was either stated flatly or strongly implied in almost all 20 of these books.
Well, obviously the Rosenbergs had it coming. Okay, that one's not that interesting. So let's go to another one.
Well, you could look at the treatment of the buffalo, for example. Most of the textbooks told a partial truth that the whites nearly exterminated the buffalo. Mm-hmm. What they didn't say was that there's a whole slew of new research out there, including Princeton anthropologist Andrew Eisenberg, who says that the Indians were already on their way to exterminating the buffalo in terms of the carrying capacity of the land before the whites ever got there. Mm-hmm. Then the textbooks ignore the fact that when the whites figured out what was going on, they said, gee, maybe we ought to save these animals. And so it was the whites that basically set up ranches and game preserves and replenished the herds down from almost nothing.
That can't be true, because I saw in Dances with Wolves that they care about the animals that they kill, and they usually pray over them. Or that was Avatar, but I'm not sure. Either one of those. Okay.
Weren't you ready in Avatar for those blue people to break out in some sort of Indian chant at any moment?
Yeah, I think it was Dances with Aliens. But anyway, but Larry, again, you know, I'm not seeing a huge scandal here. I mean, you see, I guess you're saying the libs are saying that the whites killed the buffaloes more than the Indians did. I remember in my textbook they had the guy shooting outside the train with a rifle. But you say that happened, of course, but the Indians also killed buffaloes. Okay, give me something juicy. Come on.
Well, I don't know. I kind of thought that Sacco and Vanzetti were innocent was kind of juicy. I thought the Rosenbergs were innocent was kind of juicy. I thought that, you know, I'm an economic historian, so I get all excited about things like the federal government was necessary to build the transcontinental railroads. Mm-hmm. Hello, there's something called the Great Northern Railroad that was built without a dime of government money. By the way, it was the only railroad not to fail in the Panic of 1873. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, well, so let's get to some of that stuff, right? Like, for example, you say that the founders did not create a wall of separation between church and state. How so?
Well, you have to understand that the founders operated within a certain context. I liken it to the fact that in the Federal Reserve Act, gold is not mentioned. Well, but that doesn't mean the Federal Reserve Act didn't mean for the banks to use gold as a reserve. It was so commonly understood by every banker out there that gold was the reserve that the Federal Reserve Act didn't bother to put that in there. It was so commonly understood by the founders that America would act and basically be governed as a Christian nation, that they didn't see any need to put in there the qualifier that, okay, well, this is predominantly going to be run under the auspices of a Christian nation. They were all pretty much practicing Christians. A few were practicing Unitarians like Ben Franklin. Only one was really a deist, and that's Jefferson. But virtually all the rest were regular church attenders. Washington prayed ceaselessly.
All right. Now, Larry, I think you've gone off the reservation on that one. Okay. And by the way, on the Rosenbergs...
that was the Indian question.
Right, exactly. On the Sacco and Vanzetti and the Indians and the Buffaloes and the Rosenbergs, I'm not an expert on that stuff. So, you know, and I'm willing to hear any side on that. I've got no, beef with either side of that. But on this issue, we've got a First Amendment that clearly says that we shall not establish a religion.
Establish, yeah, that's the key word.
So that seems pretty clear, doesn't it?
Well, again, it seems clear today in the context of modern Americans, but in the context of what they were writing at the time, you've got virtually all of these states funding, or not all, most of the states are funding pastors and ministers with state money. You've got state prayers offered up. You have governors regularly declaring days of Thanksgiving.
Right. So then in the United States Constitution says, we shall not establish a religion, perhaps as opposed to what they're doing in the state government.
Well, exactly. And so that's the point that, as Justice Story put it in 1821, separation of church and state, which of course is not in the Constitution, I'm sure you know that, does not mean that there will be no religion in any state or even no association of any particular religion with a particular state. What it meant was that the federal government couldn't impose a religion on the states.
Right. I mean, so again, I'm missing the big deal here. I mean, look, the Supreme Court says our interpretation of you shall not establish a religion is that the state, as in the federal government, shall not do any of the things that we think would establish a religion. Not, okay, it's not a black and white issue. Either, bam, it's a Christian country now, or it's not. There are a lot of things in between, and the Supreme Court has ruled on them one way or another. Doesn't that all seem perfectly reasonable?
The Supreme Court ruled on it, though, in 1821, the Supreme Court had ruled differently. So maybe all that's missing is just a different ruling by a different Supreme Court. When you go by that method, you're just waiting on the next, majority of 5 guys to change what is, quote, in the Constitution.
In 1821...
What we need to do is to look at how the founders saw their milieu, their culture, in terms of what they meant when they wrote these things. And they certainly did not mean that the U.S. was not to be a Christian country.
But that's just not true.
They meant that one sect of Presbyterians or Anglicans or whatever it was not to have state funding of religion.
No. Okay, look, you raised a couple of things. First of all, in the Supreme Court in the 1820s also ruled that black people were property.
Exactly.
Okay, so, no. So they changed on that, and they've had different rulings on what is considered establishing a religion. That makes perfect sense. I'm glad they changed on that. So, and then they've got to rule on it one way or another. That's the whole point of the Supreme Court, is to interpret what they meant by the Constitution.
That's true.
And when you go to what they meant by the Constitution, hold on.
That does not mean that their rulings have permanence. As we've just seen with McCain-Feingold, for example, rulings can last as short as only a couple of years.
So what do you want them to say? You want them to say, shall not establish a state religion means that it's actually that we're a Christian nation?
What I want them to say is what the Constitution said in the context of what the founders said then, which was that the states should be allowed to do what they want. If Utah wants to be a Mormon state, it's a Mormon state.
No, that's not what they meant at all. No. First of all...
Well, can you cite me a document from the 1700s that
yes,
says otherwise?
I can. I mean, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but
for
example, hold on. Let me tell you. Jefferson said, we don't care what you are, whether you're a Mohammedan, a Turk, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Jew. It doesn't matter. We're not going to establish a religion.
Jefferson, number one, wasn't there when they wrote the Constitution. He was in France. Number two, his opinion was just that, a private opinion conveyed to a group of people.
So the Founding Fathers who you don't agree with just have private opinions, and the ones that you think you agree with, their opinion counts.
Not at all. What I said was Jefferson was not there when they wrote the Constitution.
You think he might have been a little relevant,
what's in the Constitution, you should ask the people who were at the Constitutional Convention what they meant. And Madison's pretty clear by these things.
Yeah, he was pretty clear. He said, we shall not establish a religion, and furthermore, we shall have no religious tests for any political office holder. And you have to understand it within historical context. So you talk about that, Larry.
That's right. And
okay,
what was he talking about?
Hold on. You got to let me finish. No. You got to let me finish. One at a time, okay? We've given you a lot of opportunity here. Look, within the historical context you're talking about, in the whole world, every single country had a religion. We were the first nation, America was, to say that we shall not have a religion. We shall not establish a religion. I don't know why...
You didn't answer my question. Was Madison talking about the federal government or the states?
My sense of it is that the Supreme Court is right, that he was talking about the federal government and eventually the state government, because we've... look, that's going to get into the whole the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court throughout its history, how we've taken federal clauses and applied them to the states. Because under your rationale, then you could also say, well, look, the 14th Amendment changed that for the federal government, but if the states still want to discriminate against blacks, okay, the Supreme Court was wrong about that.
And that logic's pretty tortured. Let's go back to the original premise. What does a, quote, separation of church and state, which is a clause that does not even appear in the Constitution, really mean in the context of what Madison wrote about the establishment of a religion by the federal government? And what it means is exactly what it says.
All right, let me try one last thing with you,
You can read into what you want, but it means what it says, that the federal government, not states, the federal government shall not establish a religion.
On this note, let me try one last thing with you. So under your logic, you're saying that applies to the federal government, but the state governments are happy to do what they like to do. So if Michigan decided that it was from then on a Muslim state and said, you know what, we're going to do Sharia law in Michigan, you'd be cool with that?
I would be fine with them saying Michigan is going to be a Muslim state, but as soon as you say that we're going to do Sharia law, then you've got a problem because that conflicts with other federal rights that are guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. So, for example, I am fine with a state saying, okay, we're going to be a Scientologist state, but that would not go so far as to include the ability, for example, for someone to deny medical care to a minor.
All right. That's where we have our disagreements. I agree with the Supreme Court that also applies to the states, so that California can't be a Scientology state, Michigan a Muslim state, Texas evangelical state, whatever they want to be. And we have all these states who declare themselves a different religion. To what end, I don't know, because then they'd run into problems with federal law, as you just said right there anyway.
Well, they would not run into federal law.
That's not in the Constitution.
Do you know of a Presbyterian who regularly violates federal law by being a Presbyterian?
I don't know, man. Look, there's a million versions of Christianity. Some of them shake and speak in tongues and use snakes or whatever.
And
I got issues
of your
with that.
civil rights, how?
I don't know. I don't want them shaking near me.
Oh, so whenever you disapprove of a religion, you get to exclude it.
I'm playing, Larry. I'm playing. Come on. And
okay.
Besides which, you think Christians don't try to impose their way of thinking on the rest of Americans? Have you seen this country? No, Armageddon's coming. Let's make sure there's no peace deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. They actually win on those issues. So they have the effect on our policy more than anything else. All right, but look, on a different issue, real quick here, because we're running low on time. One other thing you mentioned in the book I found interesting. The book, by the way, is 7 Events That Made America America and the 48 Liberal Lies about American History.
And these are different books. We ought to make sure
people
understand that.
Oh, is that right? Oh, sorry about that. Your PR notes were a little confusing on that. Sorry. Or the notes I got, I should say. My bad. Mikhail Gorbachev is not Ronald Reagan was responsible for ending the Cold War. You think that's a lie? It was actually Reagan, not Gorbachev.
Right.
You know Gorbachev was the head of the Soviet Union, and he made the decisions that wound up unraveling it.
And when did he make those decisions?
When Ronald Reagan was president, and I was running for 9th grade class president.
That would be about almost 4 to 4.5 years after Reagan's policies were in place, in which the Soviet Union was denied access to such things as computers, bank loans from American banks, which the American military built up, convinced them that they couldn't win.
All right, look, that's an interesting theory, and I'm not one that I don't necessarily disagree with, but I don't think they should put in a history textbook that Gorbachev was not in charge of the Soviet Union, and it was, in fact, all Ronald Reagan's doing.
Oh, no, and I would certainly say he's in charge of the Soviet Union. That's not the, if you want to read the quotations that I quoted from the textbooks, they basically ascribe all the end of the Cold War to Mikhail Gorbachev suddenly waking up. He goes to bed, Nikolai Lenin, he wakes up Milton Friedman, he decides he's going to liberalize Russia. All of a sudden there's no more problems. And the fact is he doesn't pull the SS-20s out of the Urals until Reagan puts the Pershings and cruise missiles into Europe. He doesn't pull out of Afghanistan until we start shipping Stingers
No.
to the
Look,
the
you can make an
Mujahideen.
argument. You can make an argument that he tried to keep the Soviet Union tried to keep up with America, and they couldn't. That's a good argument. But here's why they made all the decisions they made: because they ran out of money, Lebowski. Okay, they just ran out of money
because
their system doesn't
and
work.
Why did they run
and
out
their
of money?
system
They ran out of money.
Their system doesn't
for
work.
a whole bunch of reasons. One of which was that Reagan was spinning them into the ground.
No, it's because communism was never going to work. And it's not like Reagan made communism bad. Communism didn't work to begin with. So, all right, anyway, I know, Reagan's a god. All right, listen, Larry Schweikart, fascinating book, or apparently it turns out a couple of books. Thank you for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we'll be right back.